This is episode 303 of Super League Pod. Another week of fans' eye view takes on the greatest game, answering the greatest questions. Who's Super League's newest porn star? Who's the wanker in the stand? And did David sleep with a horse? And some less hard-hitting topics of kids crying, England suggestions, and Williams' likely destination. Strap in, it's SLP time. Hello listeners, welcome along to episode 303 of the Super League Pod, and in the sort of revolving door of co-hosts, with me not quite sure who's going to pop through. This week joining me, Mark, is Saints fan David.
Hey Mark, nice to speak to you again, and hello everybody.
Yeah, I wish we could have had you on last week when your team lost and my team won, but
Look at the draw, Mark, look at the draw.
Yeah, it is. Although, actually, once you've told everyone who the sponsor of this episode is, I do have something else to talk to you about that the luck of the draw falls in my favour on. So do you want to, first of all, give a shout out to our sponsor?
I certainly will. This episode is sponsored by Rob's Toy Shop. Find a wide range of toys, gifts, rugby league birthday cards and more at Rob's Toy Shop on eBay. Visit stores.ebay.co.uk/Rob's Toy Shop. And on any orders over £5, you can earn 5% cash back. And also 1% of your order value will go into the SLP coffers by putting SLP discount at checkout.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks, Rob's Toy Shop, for their continued support. Yeah, we've got quite a lot coming up on the show this week. Some NRL stories involving former and current Wigan men lead the news slate this week. And we'll also discuss the Origin squads, amongst other news. Then we've got fan reviews from every one of the blowout matches in this week's Super League. And results from around the rest of Rugby League before we'll make some guesses for the Challenge Cup semi-finals and Women's Challenge Cup final. But whilst we're talking about results from all around the world, the rest of the world of Rugby League, I mean, everyone knows that on Saturday there was a significant result that I'm sure was the focus of everyone's Saturday. It wasn't, unfortunately, the one that was on Sky Sports. But over at Robin Park Arena, David, Warriors beat Saints 40 points to 22. In the under-19s derby. So that's the main match that we'll be talking.
That's the main match. We're gonna focus almost the whole show on that, are we, Mark?
I've got some serious deep dives about the growing halfback partnership between Alex Sutton and Logan Astley. I think those two are coming along great together. There's some, we need to talk about the pace of Jake Douglas and Joe Robinson.
Look, your pathetic efforts to distract attention from the main game on Saturday isn't going to rub, Mark, quite honestly.
Fair enough then. But I assume you didn't catch the big game on Saturday afternoon though, that had that very one-sided scoreline.
Yes, I certainly did, and I kept track of the academy as well.
Couple of bits of feedback from last week's show. So the first one comes in from our statsman Neil. We made a request for milestone watches from across the league, as well as his beloved Warrington Wolves, but he said in response to the request for game-wide milestones, these will be available from 2022 when Rugby League Record Keepers Club website, which he reminds us is www.rugbyleaguerecords.com, becomes dynamic and updated each week for games played. Until this functionality is added, you'll have to make do with wire milestones only from Neil. But a great reminder, if one was needed, for any of the stats heads out there, sign up at the Record Keepers Club. They're all the work that's being done by Neil and the club statisticians across the world across the UK, sort of anyway, at least in Rugby League, is making progress. But more people signing up, getting involved, helping out is how that can keep making progress. So then eventually, a very dynamic and fluid, free to user service will come out of it. So go and check that out and sign up if you can and want to. We also had a bit of feedback that relates to the follow-on from the fallout from the academy licensing decisions, and Ralph Rimmer's interview specifically on Sky Sports before the match on Thursday evening. And always in our shadow, good to hear from that side of Hull again, said, "How to pour oil on a fire. Kids cry, big deal. Bloke knows how to encourage youngsters." So we'll talk a bit about the Sky interview with Ralph Rimmer in a minute, but me and Sarah tried to give a holistic view of the academy licensing decision, the situation that leaves clubs in and youngsters and that sort of stuff. But what's your take on it, David? You had plenty of time to mull on it whilst you were walking around the southwest.
I mean, to be honest, Mark, I haven't really spent a lot of time sort of looking into the background of it, but from what I've been able to sort of read so far, it feels very short-sighted to me. But it seems to me to be one of a number of short-sighted decisions that are taking place at the moment, which I think are putting the very short-term financial considerations of the RFL in particular ahead of the long-term health of the game, and that's very worrying, I think. I was concerned about the amount of support that the RFL had requested from the government during the pandemic in comparison to what our brethren in rugby union had done. We took very small loans out in order to, from my perspective, just keep the game ticking over. And I'm worried now that we're reaping the whirlwind of the financial crisis, you know, with a lower Super League BBC deal as well, that we're reaping the whirlwind of that sort of quite short-termist, very unambitious protection that we sought from the government at the time.
Yeah, there is a worry around the finances in the game. I mean, with the new TV deal being 25% less than the previous one and running only over a 2-year period, and once that 2-year period is up, it's when the clubs will have to start repaying the loans to the government as well that were taken out. So yeah, there is worries there from a governing body standpoint and from individual club standpoints in that way. So yeah, maybe like you say, when you wrap it into a bigger picture of the overall state of things, it becomes more worrying. The Rimmer interview itself, did you catch this before the Salford versus Warrington game?
I didn't. No, I didn't see it. No.
So effectively, the bit that's drawn the most comment probably was in response to the suggestion that there's kids who are currently at the clubs that haven't got the licenses that had them before, Castleford, Hull KR and Bradford, that are now, that were in tears with this decision. Ralph Rimmer's rather, I thought, kind of petulant and ill thought through, regardless of whether it's truthful or not, response was that kids cry when they don't make it into academy sides, and kids cry when they don't make it into the senior sides after being on an academy books. So kids cry, so what? Kind of seemed to be the like I say, petulant answer. Now he was backed into a corner because he had it coming from both sides, from Carney and from O'Connor, kind of both being critical and negative towards the decision making. But it felt like a guy who hadn't prepped for the situation and was reactive rather than kind of talking about, he could have talked about numbers. This many players unfortunately don't make it into Super League sides that are on the academy books, rather than saying kids cry when they don't make the first team. It seemed a bit, stooping down to the level of challenge rather than being a statesman-like front figurehead for the sport. But there were actually lots of things within the interview that made some sense. That did kind of reiterate what we'd read in the week anyway, coming out of the RFL side of things. But one thing that hasn't been pulled out is I kind of felt Terry O'Connor sort of led the conversation down a path that really went away from the academies. He started talking about what should happen for scholarships, kids getting the opportunity to play for town teams, and that sort of stuff that he got to do when he was coming up through the ranks. I mean, didn't talk too much about the fact that he actually made his break at Salford and then at Wigan before he got to properly have a experience some time at his hometown club Widnes. In that conversation of he wanted to play for Widnes. I think sometimes people let the emotion have got the better of themselves about the individual clubs, which is totally understandable. But the points about scholarship games and town teams and stuff like that builds into the more important thing here, which is this academy stuff has been, announced and talked about so widely in such isolation. And like me and Sarah talked a bit about last week, and like you mentioned just a bit there, like what's the whole approach here? Like, are they thinking of doing something different at scholarship level? Are they thinking about doing something different at schools level? Are they thinking about doing something different with representative level coming through those school and scholarship systems before you hit academies at 16, 17 years old?
Yeah. I mean, we don't know, do we? And this follows on from some quite disappointing participation numbers over the last few years ahead of the pandemic, where we'd had our Sports England grants cut back because we hadn't got to the sorts of levels of participation numbers that we'd been pitching for. So there does seem to be a lack of strategy and thinking, and in the light of everything that's happened with the pandemic, it's a bit worrying that we don't appear to have a really clear idea of how we want to approach participation in the sport.
And I think the key missing part to that is participation at the younger age ranges. And, I know this part of this decision about cutting back the academies is so that more players stay with their community clubs so that they might not drift away from the game if they don't make it to the professional ranks after being in an academy, which to me has some merit. But and that's important. But one of the things around participation that, seems to be a success and maybe is by luck rather than judgment, I'm not sure, but is the spread of the different types of rugby league that are getting played. So from your kind of lower contact versions of touch, tag and cross league to your, disability rugby league, women's rugby league, getting much more exposure now so that you can really feel the girls' game growing from where it's already been for, 30, 40 years to now being more inspiring for girls, seeing these clubs that they can play for at the Super League level and all these community clubs having loads of age ranges for them to play in now. But that can't come at the expense of the bread and butter, and it only will develop the women's game as well as the men's game if they get more into schools, if they find a way to maybe make the lower end of the grassroots scale work better, making sure kids are in the right environments coming through their community clubs, that that links into when they're at schools as well, they get to play there and they get tasters of it, even if it is again the lower contact versions of the sport. That should be the strategies that are in place. And it almost feels like we're working back towards getting there. Like we've tried to address participation at adult level by increasing, the amount of games like Masters that get played and the amount of, and the other different variants we just mentioned. But then now we're trying to address it at the community game level at a sort of late teenage by doing this academy switch up in thinking. Well, wouldn't it have been better to start at the bottom, at the youngest age, and find ways to teach all of those, or certainly jump to that stage now rather than mess with the academy stage at this level, at this point, and find a way to create a pathway so there's more players coming into it at the bottom that can feed 12, 14, 16 fully functioning academies, rather than saying that there's not enough participation to support that within the